Welcome to the Maniac Chronicles. This is episode number 5. I am the Masked Maniac, known to some of you as Cranky Frankie, and this is actually going to be an episode that I never really thought I would do a video of. Or never really thought I would talk about. But, you know, it says talking makes you feel better, and maybe talking can make me feel better and maybe make some people watching feel better or deal with stuff. The subject of this Maniac Chronicles is dealing with, how I've dealt with and how I'm dealing with and trying to overcome my childhood of physical, mental abuse. I've never said this in my whole life before to anybody, including my wife, but sexual abuse, physical beatings. People talk about bullying. I was bullied like nobody was ever bullied in their life. They were vicious beatings, sadness, depression as a little boy, loneliness, and how I dealt with it then and how I deal with it now and try to overcome it now. This is probably going to be a multi-part series I'm going to do, because it's pretty serious. There'll be very little joking around. I mean, I can't not joke. But, I grew up an upper middle class little boy in an upper middle class family. My dad owned a bunch of car dealerships. My mom had a photography studio. I was a very happy little boy. Never spanked, never yelled at, nothing. I was just happy. Happy with my toys, happy with my life. Everything was just good. Not a whole lot of friends. Had a little friend across the street, Gloria. She was my best friend. Had another friend from school, Rocky Golson, both of who I still speak to. And it's very important I make mention, Rocky is black. It is something that'll come up a little later in the video. But very, 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 very important is when my dad passed away, I was 10 years old. And everything just changed. Like I said, I was never yelled at before. I was never hit before. I don't remember anything but happiness when my dad was alive. And then all of a sudden, my dad was sick for many years. And I was at my friend's house, Marvin Glickman. I'll never forget Marvin. Was just a creepy little turd. Everything was, I got better toys than you, one of those type kids. But his mother was the same. Marvin has better toys than you, Frank. Marvin gets to do more stuff than you, Frank. I mean, I'll never forget this woman. And we're talking about 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And I remember I was at Marvin's house one day. I was 10 years old. It was 1975. And I'll never forget this. This was the start of it. I'm sitting on the floor at Marvin's house, and I'm playing with my G.I. Joe toys with the Kung Fu grip. And Marvin's mother comes down the stairs. And I remember the phone rang. Marvin's mother comes down the stairs, and she stops halfway on the stairs, and she looks at me. And this is what she says. She looks at me at 10 years old, and she says, "Frank, your father just died. Your mother's coming to pick you up later tonight." That's it. That's how I find out my dad died. And for me, my childhood just ended then. My mother, who seemed sane before, never would she say she had a breakdown. My mother never recovered from it. My mother became And I waited for my mother to pass away till I even thought about doing a video like this. My mother was a certified nut job. And it all started then. And she never recovered from it. I think for the first year, I don't even know if she left the house. It was just miserable. I had nobody, absolutely nobody. I sank into a world of sitting on the floor, doing nothing but playing with G.I. Joe toys, playing with Big Jim toys, my Evel Knievel, my Mego superheroes. That's all I had. It was just me, just me. Friends were very limited. You know, my mother would make a birthday party for me. She'd invite 30 kids. Gloria and Rocky are the only two to come. I'd be in McDonald's for a McDonald's birthday party back then. 2 people show up. We rented a whole room. And don't get me wrong. Never in my life did my mom hit me. Never in my life did a family member hit me or sexually abuse me. The home thing was the yelling, the screaming in your face until you cry. You're laying in bed. I remember laying in bed at 10 years old and hearing my mother screaming at me in the other room, just screaming like I did something. I mean, all night long. And that's the minor stuff. But my dad died September 11th, 1975. School started right after that. And as soon as I went to school, it started. Never bullied in my life. I go to school, first day of school. Hey, there's Frank. Frank's dad died. Frank has no dad. I mean, who says that type stuff? But it didn't stop. It started I remember the very first day of school. And I'm not going to give this kid's last name, but his name was Jed. All right, let's call him Jed Applebaum. And the very first day of school, he just walks up to me and says, your father's dead. Your father's dead. And I don't know what to say. And he starts beating on me. And never has anybody physically touched. I was a little 10-year-old boy. Nobody's ever touched me in my life. Beating. I remember the teacher trying to pull him off me, crying. That's how badly I was beaten. I remember my eye sockets bleeding. Just beatings. My mother they bring me to the nurse's office just to show you what I dealt with my mom. They bring me to the nurse's office. They told my mom what happened. Took my mother 3 hours to come pick me up. We lived 2 blocks away from the school. But it didn't stop. I remember the first week of school. This idiot, let's say his name was Lee Rosner. Skinny kid. Skinniest thing you've ever seen. Just walking up to me for no reason and smacking me across the face as hard as he could. Nobody stopped him. Nobody did anything. It just went on and on. And it didn't stop. And it went on for the whole school year, rubbing paint all over me. Sitting in class, having all the girls in the back of the room just laughing at me. Just laughing. Frank smells. Frank's ugly. Frank has a big nose. Frank has no father. Frank can't do anything about it. I remember them holding me down and rubbing paint all over me. And nobody stops this. Nobody stopped it. It just went on and on. And then I remember it was just about the second year after my dad died. So I was probably about 10 or 11. And I'm waiting outside for my mom to pick me up. I lived 2 blocks from school and I wasn't allowed to walk home. Until I was 13, my mother wouldn't let me cross the streets. So I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And school got out, let's say 3 o'clock, right? I live 2 blocks away from the school. It's 4:30. My mother doesn't come. Everybody's locked up from the school, okay? She's just sitting on the edge of her bed like always, watching TV, right? Bunch of teenage black kids come along. This is 1975, 76. I'm 10 years old, 11 years old. They grab me and they tie me to a moving car. And they start driving around the block with me being dragged on the car. Then they just leave me there. No, actually what happened is a dog came over and bit me. They got scared. Dog came over and started biting me and they ran away. Nobody did anything. Nothing. Bunch of old ladies looking out from their window. My mother doesn't do anything. The police drove me to school a couple days after it happened. But it went on, and it went on for years, and it didn't stop. How much time we do here? I remember like the only way to cope with this, sitting in a world of watching TV. Let me tell you, all kidding aside, if it wasn't for the Little Rascals, I don't know if I would have killed myself at 11 years old. I would just sit and watch the Little Rascals all the time. I'd sit, thank God. The people who made G.I. Joes and Big Jims, they don't understand what they did to save my life. Because I would sit there and just play with my G.I. Joes, play with my Big Jims. I would be in a world all alone. And all I'd hear is my mother yelling. Yelling, 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 and lying. Everything was a lie. You know, right before my dad died, he bought me this beautiful white bike. And I loved my bike. And he's gone 6 months. My mother finally makes a friend, Edith. Edith never did anything wrong. But my mother makes a friend. She gives Edith's children the bike that my father just bought me before he passed away. And it was horrible. And every day I'm getting beaten at school. And I have no place to go. It was the worst experience. I can't even explain to you the bullying. You know, they would say, kids ring your doorbell and run away. No, kids would ring my doorbell, and then when I would go to the door, they'd smack me in the face and run away. It was... I can't explain. And this old, we're talking about just 10 and maybe part of 11 years old. You know, the principal, I remember his name, Robert Roxenberg. Always, always, always trying to get me to go into his office with him. And I never felt comfortable with this guy. And no, he never did anything to me. But I could see it. Like, I could see it. There was always something uncomfortable about this principal. Like, I would get beaten up. Actually, you know what? We're going to continue this story on episode 6. So, you know what? Let's end this here. And I'm going to go, because we only have like 12, 13 minutes to do each one. I'm going to go and we're going to continue this on episode 6. So let me figure out how I could stop this here.